In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to counter 57 cards in Clash Royale using only the Knight. So starting off with the Goblins, you can just go for the Knight off to the side, and as you can see, easily able to take them out and have majority of its health. For the Goblin gang, it's going to be pretty easy to counter too. Just go Knight low to the side of your tower. You don't want to play it immediately because then the Goblins are going to attack the Knight before it completely spawns in. Even though the minions are a flying card, the Knight is easily able to deal with them. You can just go for Knight last second just to tank those remaining shots that the minions have. For the Spear Goblins, play the Knight immediately on top of them. Unlike the Goblin gang, there's no Goblins, so you don't need to wait to play the Knight. If the archers are coming down both in the same lane, just play the Knight right on top of them to stop them right in their tracks. And even if they decide to split the archers, it doesn't matter. You can just go for the Knight in the middle to distract both of them and take them out. For the Firecracker guys, you're obviously going to want to make sure to get your King Tower activated. So go for the Knight in front of your King Tower like that, off to the right side of the Arena Tower. It also works on the other side too. And don't worry guys, it also works with the Evolved Firecracker. When the Evolved Firecracker is coming in, do the same placement with that Knight, and it'll damage the King Tower, but not your Arena Towers. The Bomber's pretty easy to counter. Obviously, when it's coming down, just go Knight right on top, take it out. Next up, we have the Royal Delivery. I decided to play the Royal Delivery on top of the Knight to show you that even when it's played on top of the Knight, and without the help of the tower, it still kills it. Next up, we have the Skeleton Dragons. Kind of like the minions, you can just play the Knight last second next to your tower, and it will have so much health that the Skeleton Dragons have no chance of breaking through with the help of your tower. Next, of course, we have the Knight. For this one, you don't have to rush and play your Knight. You can kind of just play it last couple seconds as it's approaching your tower, and you'll have a nice counter push because your Knight lives with over half of its health. Next up, we got the Ice Spirit. Now, obviously, this is a pretty big negative trade, but it's still useful to do because it'll damage your tower if you ignore it, and you can get a counter push off of it. Now, the Fire Spirit, on the other hand, deals way more damage than the Ice Spirit, so this one, it actually makes a lot of sense to defend. And the Electro Spirit, same thing, but you're going to want to play the Knight a little higher, so that way the E-Spirit doesn't chain and connect to the Knight and then your tower. Alright guys, now we start the rares, and this is also the final spirit to counter the Heal Spirit. When the Flying Machine's coming in, play the Knight last second next to your tower right before the Flying Machine locks on, and it's easily going to absorb all the Flying Machine shots. The Wizard is a card that can be very annoying for mid-ladder players, but luckily the Knight is going to be a great way to take him out. The Valkyrie is very easy to take out. She's another tank just like the Knight that does splash damage, but unfortunately for her, she's not going to deal enough DPS to get through the Knight. If the Zappies are coming in all in the same lane, you can just go Knight right on top of them, and even though they stun the Knight over and over again, it doesn't even matter. The Knight still comes out on top and kills all three of them. Even if your opponent decides to split Zappies, you can just go Knight in the middle, and it's enough to distract that Zappy on the right and distract the two on the left. Musketeer is going to be really easy to counter. Just like the Wizard, you can play the Knight right on top of her, and she will not get anywhere near your tower. For the Goblin Brawler, just play the Knight in the middle, and it'll run right into the Knight and get stopped right there. Even though the Mini P.E.K.K.A. does a lot of DPS, the Knight is still able to stall it long enough because the Mini P.E.K.K.A. requires 3 shots to take out the Knight. With the Dark Goblin, be sure to react quickly so it doesn't lock on top of your tower. You can Knight and have your tower help out as long as you don't play the Knight too early. The Healer, on the other hand, you're going to want to wait to play your Knight, because if you play the Knight earlier, it means she's going to heal herself up when she comes in contact with the Knight, which means she's going to stay alive for a bit longer, whereas if you wait, she doesn't get healed up for a few seconds at the beginning. The Mega Minion is very easy to counter with the Knight too. Because it normally only gets 1 swipe on your tower, you want to play the Knight last second, because if you play the Knight too early, then it's going to lose too much of its health. And last but not least for the rares, we got the Ice Golem. Well, I mean, this obviously is going to be easy to stop because, of course, it doesn't deal any damage to the Knight. Now, guys, we are on to the Epics. So if the Bowler's coming down across the bridge, just go for the Knight off to the side. It's going to be a nice positive elixir trade. Just make sure not to play the Knight in front of the Bowler because then it'll line up and hit your tower, which would not be good. For the baby dragon, you can play the knight kind of a few seconds after you see it go over the bridge, and it is easily going to be enough of a tank to stop that baby dragon from getting anywhere near your tower. Even though the giant skeleton is 6 elixir, it is no match for the knight. If you play the knight towards the middle and the giant skeleton has to walk over to him, it is going to be enough to barely stop that giant skeleton before it's able to reach the tower. The bomb doesn't even reach the tower either. As you can see, it's a few tiles away. Even though the witch spawns skeletons, it doesn't matter. The knight is just so tanky that the skeletons don't do nearly enough damage to take him out before he kills the witch. The Electro Dragon is going to be kind of similar to the Baby Dragon, but the one thing is make sure to play the Knight a little bit higher up so that way the E-Drag can't chain the Knight and then it also chains the tower too. For the Executioner, same thing as the Bowler, make sure to play the Knight on the side and not in front so that an axe doesn't get anywhere near your tower. For the cannon cart, the placement doesn't really matter that much. You can play it far away if you want, but still the ideal placement is right on top of that cannon cart just because you're going to be able to take it out quickly, but even if you play it lower, it still deals with it. For the wall breakers, you can only fully counter if they're both in the same lane. Be sure to react very quickly because if you play the knight too late, one of them will reach the tower, but if you react quick, it does get fully countered. Even if the Dark Prince is charging, it doesn't matter. The knight alone can put a stop to him. You just place him in the middle, pretty far away, and they'll clash it out, but the knight comes out on top. The skeleton army looks pretty threatening, but if you just play the knight in the middle with the help of your tower, you can pick off those skeletons one by one, and even your second arena tower comes in to help out as well. The Barbarian Barrel is going to be quite easy to counter too. You can just go for your knight last second before it gets to the tower, and as you can see with proper timing, the Barbarian doesn't even get a shot on the knight. The guards are going to be pretty similar to the skeleton army, but actually the one difference is you can play your knight lower to wait later to play him, because in this case you don't really need the second arena tower to help out. And that now leaves us with the last epic, the Hunter. Even though the Hunter deals a ton of damage at close range, you still want to play the knight right on top of him. And now guys, we're on to the legendaries. Even though the Night Witch spawns bats, that is no problem. Kind of like the Witch, the bats just don't do nearly enough damage to break through that knight, and after he takes out that Night Witch, there's an additional bat that spawns, but he still stays alive. Even though the Inferno Dragon is typically pretty good against tanks, with the proper timing and placement, you can go for a knight and end up kiting the Inferno Drag backwards. It'll follow the knight, and you have a pretty nice counter push going in the same lane as well. When the Lumberjack's coming in, it's pretty easy to counter. Just make sure you don't play the knight too close to the tower, because then when the Lumberjack dies, it's going to drop that rage, which will damage your tower. The Phoenix is going to be pretty similar to the Inferno Drag. You're just going to want to kite it backwards. You don't want to play the knight too early on, because then what's going to happen is you'll actually have the knight take too much damage, and as you can see, the knight goes back to take out that egg. The Bandit is obviously going to be taken out easily, especially when she doesn't dash into the knight, but even if she does, she'll die and it won't even be that close. Now, this is a massive positive elixir trade. Even though the Mega Knight is 7 elixir, if you go for knight in the middle, the reason you want to play the knight in the middle is so your second arena tower helps out. And when you have the second arena tower helping out, it is going to be barely enough to take out that Mega Knight, and the knight still survives. The Electro Wizard's going to be really simple to take out. It's kind of like a glass cannon like the Musketeer. It's no match for the knight. Now, the Fisherman's an interesting one. You can actually play the knight last second when it latches onto your tower, so that way the Fisherman will have taken some damage from the tower already. So I know the Sparky looks pretty scary sometimes, but because it needs 2 shots to take out the knight, with the help of your tower, the knight is easily going to be enough of a distraction to take out the Sparky. The Knight is actually a perfect counter to the Ghost since it does splash damage and tanks are very effective against it. It'll easily win in the 1v1 and give you a nice counter push. The Ice Wizard is very weak. It is not really known for being a good card on offense, let's put it that way, so the Knight wipes it out. The Mother Witch might be good against swarms, but she's not very good against tanks such as the Knight. If your opponent plays Princess directly at the bridge, unless you predict it like a god, unfortunately she will get a shot on your tower. But if she was placed in the back and she's working her way up, you can just go Knight like that to take her out. If your opponent used a miner on defense, you can use the knight to counter that defensive miner so it doesn't end up getting some chip damage on top of your tower. That leaves us with the last legendary, the Magic Archer. With precise timing, you can play the knight after the Magic Archer crossed over the bridge but didn't connect to your tower yet. Even if the Golden Knight player used their ability, it doesn't matter. It jumps right into that knight, and then when they battle it out with the help of the tower, it's easily enough to stop that Golden Knight. Against the Skeleton King, if its ability is all the way full, unfortunately you're not going to be able to fully counter with just the knight, but if they use their ability or they don't have enough elixir for it, then the knight is going to be more than enough to take him out. Now for the Archer Queen, unfortunately, if she uses her ability, the knight will not be enough to fully counter her. She will get one shot on top of the tower, but without her ability, if it was used on defense, then it's easily able to be taken out. And lastly, guys, we have the Monk. You can easily stop it when it doesn't have its ability, and also, even when the Monk has his ability, technically that's not going to really help it break through the knight. All it's going to do is just get some chip damage on top of the tower.